Okay, let's picture this. A worker comes to you and says some items are missing from a shelf. It's a pretty common problem in a warehouse, but it's also a serious one. As a supervisor, what you do next is absolutely crucial. So let's break down the best way to handle missing stock. So an employee tells you the count on the shelf doesn't match the number in the computer system. This happens, right? But it's in this moment that having a clear process is so important. So what's the very first thing you should do? Now, it might seem like a small thing, but for a supervisor, any missing stock is a big red flag. It can mess up customer orders, it can affect the company's financial records, and it could even point to bigger security problems. So acting quickly and correctly is really key. All right, before we get into the step-by-step process, let's make sure we're all speaking the same language. If we understand a few key words, everything else is going to be much, much clearer. First up is missing stock. This one is pretty simple, right? It's exactly what it sounds like. Items that are in your system, but you just can't find them in their actual spot. And this difference between what your records say and what's really there, well, that has a name. It's a discrepancy. So if your system says you have 100 items, but you only count 98, you've got a 2-item discrepancy. Simple as that. So once a discrepancy is reported, what's your first move? You verify. Verifying just means checking everything again, very carefully, to make sure the problem is real. This should always be your first step. Now let's say you verify the count and, yep, items are definitely missing. The general word for this kind of loss is shrinkage. And shrinkage can be caused by different things, like theft or damage, or even just a simple mistake in counting. To find the reason for that shrinkage, a supervisor starts an investigation. This is just the formal process of looking for the cause of the problem. It could mean checking cameras or looking over paperwork. Okay, so we've got our keywords down. Now let's see how they actually work in a real situation. Here's a pretty typical conversation that might happen between a supervisor and a worker. It almost always starts with a report, just like this. A worker has spotted a clear difference between the computer data and the stock they can see on the shelf. So right here, the specific problem is a 5-unit discrepancy. And listen, while 5 might not sound like a huge number, the process for handling 5 missing items has to be the same as if it were 50. Every single unit matters. And notice the supervisor's first response. They don't panic, they don't blame anyone, they just start with that logical first step. Let's verify. This makes sure they're working with the right information before they do anything else. Okay, so once the count has been verified and they know for sure the stock is missing, the supervisor moves on. They officially record the problem and then start an investigation to find out why it happened. And see, the worker also uses the correct vocabulary here, asking if it's a case of shrinkage. When everyone on the team uses the same terms, it makes talking about problems so much more efficient. The supervisor doesn't guess. Instead, they talk about the official process for finding the answer, mentioning things like security and audits. This response shows that there's a clear, solid plan for solving the problem. That conversation shows a really clear procedure, doesn't it? So let's break it all down into a simple 3-step action plan that any supervisor can use. This is the key thing to remember. First, you verify. Always double-check those numbers. Second, you investigate. Find out why the stock is gone. And third, you report it. Make a formal, accurate record. Verify, investigate, report. It's a clear process, and it works. So why is it so important to follow this process every single time? Well, it's not just about 5 missing items. When you have a consistent process, it has a much bigger impact on the entire warehouse. Following this process does 2 very important things. First, it creates accountability. That means everyone on the team understands their role in protecting the inventory. And second, it improves security. By investigating every little loss, you can find and fix the weak spots in your system before they turn into major problems. So the process is simple, but the investigation itself can be pretty challenging. We'll leave you with a final question to think about. What's the biggest challenge you face when you investigate a problem like this? Because just identifying that challenge is the very first step to improving your own process. Thanks for watching.